Thank you guys for tuning in, and we are Tamarack Grove Campfire Conversations. We're gathered to talk today just about one of the premier projects in the Tamarack Grove legacy. Anybody that's followed social media, anybody that's been on the website or has been through our building has seen a lot about this project known as the Ark Encounter. Let's start with just the basics, the facts.
So the Ark Encounter is actually in Williamstown, Kentucky. It's part of the Creation Museum, part of Andros and Genesis. And at the time, we were a company of about 5 working in the backyard days still, and what we normally call sweet bees in backyard, because it literally was a tough shed with insulation in the backyard. And very times you get a project of this size, nature, caliber, what it stands for, and at the time at Tamarack, we were actually at a point of just really trying to discover what our next chapter for the company was, and deciding if we should expand, bring on more staff, move out of the backyard, sweet bee. And so the timing of this project was really crucial to our trajectory as a company. That time, Doug had been with us for maybe just a couple of years is all, full time, and yeah, we got this opportunity to work on an amazing project, the largest heavy timber project in the world at that point. But yeah, it was a full-scale Noah's Ark of the biblical proportions, height, width, length, in terms of a museum. The Creation Museum was very passionate about bringing to life someday. Well, in 2013, that opportunity to bring it to life came about, and we got the call from the architect, from the lead architect for the project, and really reached out to us based on our experience in heavy timber. And it really opened the door for us to strategically grow and with a project of that size. But Mr. Leroy Troyer, who is the architect, reached out to me, and at the time was sitting in the backyard with honestly shorts, flip-flops, and as some of you have seen, the visor upside down, and got a call of just our interest, if we'd ever heard of the project, and would be interested in helping their team cross the finish line. That entailed, in terms of going back there and learning about the project, being honest in our own decisions of, gosh, can we take on a project this size? Because honestly, at that time, as I said, being a company of 5, and to say yes to a project of this caliber would entail a lot of parts that would have to take place. And so we ultimately said yes, and that really brought us into, Doug, you were just kind of fresh in the company at that time, and so you literally got thrown in the deep end of the pool in terms of having to not only run a project of that size, but all the things that it allowed you to see, and doors that opened for you in your career, and just that whole experience. So
I mean, there's so many cool facets of that project, but I think it's, like you said, it's actually true biblical proportions. And there's not like blueprints in the Bible on how the Ark was built by any means. And so I think it's cool.
It's only been done one time.
Yeah, right. There's not a whole lot for examples on that one. So I thought it was cool that they actually had like historians looking at, a cubit and what a cubit actually meant and what were the measurements, and trying to come up with the actual dimensions based on that. That was pretty neat. And then, like you said, it was like diving into the deep end with that project. It's you said the largest timber frame project in the world, and that's something that's pretty amazing to put on the resume at just a few years out of school, and you end up learning real quick working on a project like that.
And it was exciting to take that project and really do it under the current codes. You think about that, the original Ark was all out of gopher wood and probably a lot of twine and man-made rope, but to do it under current codes with fire, with structural, with life safety, that in itself was a huge challenge. And then to honor the wishes of the owner with trying to get that authenticity of what it might have felt like under those times, under those circumstances. But all in all, it was a very challenging project, but it was such a fun project to be involved with.
Give me an order of magnitude. Is it the length of a football field? More than
it's like 1.5 times football, the size of a football field, and I can't remember the exact dimensions in feet, but at the front of the Ark, the cell is roughly 8-9 story building, in terms of being up there 80-90 feet. So
We worked primarily on the bow and the stern portions of it, which I always say, that was obviously the hardest part, right? There's you have the curvature coming up from the base as well as from the front to the back kind of thing, and trying to design with double curvature in mind and that sort of thing. It was, I think originally when it was done, the Bible says it took 100 years. We obviously didn't have 100 years on the schedule to be able to get it done. But we did have the blessing of some 3D modeling, which helped that project a ton, because trying to see some of those connections.
We had
with that
100
type
weeks.
of curvature. Yeah, exactly. So that was interesting, being able to actually model it and do our analysis on the computer programs and be able to actually rotate it around and kind of see how it's going to actually come together and design accordingly.
I think every engineer, architect out there has that one project, right? That you can always come back to and say, man, that was just such a fun project, but something that from a humble standpoint, I was so honored to be a part of, and passion project, all those kind of things that tie into one project. The Ark Encounter for sure is that project for me personally, and I feel like to your point of just what doors it's opened for Tamarack Grove, but it was definitely a fun project.
It's no secret, Brian, that you're a man of faith, and you're a faith-forward guy. So are you, Doug. At the time, it was really the two of you as owner and the lead, backup guy. You were Batman and Robin, if you will. And now here comes this project that is one of the most powerful stories in the Bible, and you're afforded the opportunity to be a key part of that. To me, that just, we use the term passion project. I've heard you talk about that so many times before, but to me, that just feels like such an amazing marriage of skills and your passions and everything. Tell me about that.
Bonnie and I are a couple of faith, and we wouldn't be here today without God, and just that whole journey and confiding in Him, believing in Him, and having Him along the whole way in our journey. Bonnie and I were actually at a point where we were in the backyard, Sweet Bee, really just praying and confiding on what's the next step, what's the next chapter for Tamarack. If we wanted it our way, we would probably honestly still be in the backyard. But there was this sense of just being still, of like, what does the next chapter look? And in this 2 to 3 week phase of just really being purposeful of praying and fasting, I get a call from Leroy. And out of the blue, never met him, never talked to him on the phone, didn't even know who he was. Kind of maybe didn't even know about the Ark Encounter in terms of where it was at along the process of design and their timelines. And got that phone call, went back there, spent 2 or 3 days, like I said, and came back and really cascaded us into defining what that next chapter of Tamarack was. But I feel like at times in life and in business, if we just sometimes heed the Spirit and not get out too far in front of ourselves, but kind of sit in that shadow, it's amazing what can happen out of that. And this is clearly, you can't make this stuff up in terms of that journey, that experience. Meeting Mr. Troyer, God rest his soul, he passed away a couple years ago, but even looking at that window that was opened up to me to have a 4 or 5 year relationship with Leroy, with his last time here on this side of heaven, but to be able to experience that journey and those conversations and to look back of just that brief moment is pretty cool, pretty exciting.
And during that time of being there, especially for the grand opening, once they had all the exhibits in there and everything, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, most of the exhibits are focused on how could this actually be possible? How could they have lived in the Ark? How could they have built the Ark? What did that look like? How could they tend to the animals? Different things like that. And so all those exhibits are amazing. But me, being the nerdy structural engineer that I am, right, putting my arms around the big columns and not being able to touch them because they're just so big, you can draw it on paper, you can specify a size, you can do all those things. But until you actually get there and wrap your arms around a big column like that, right. You don't really have that feel.
Yeah, how did they get it here? How did they put it in position? How did they make the connection?
Sometimes you try to wrap yourself around a project when you're in it, but literally we got to wrap ourselves around a project.
Yeah, exactly. You say, if somebody gets an opportunity to go see it, what do I recommend to them? Wrap your arms around the column. I mean, it's so cool.
It's cool.
We used real trees, we used engineered lumber, we used glue lambs, we used concrete. But just the exciting part of this too was just the Amish crew. In that part of the country, as we all know, there's a lot of Amish communities, but I got to work alongside Ernest and Ori, two brothers, and they oversaw many Amish crews, but they threw this whole thing up in 15 months. And but just to see the craftsmanship, the traditional joinery cuts, just their thought process of how they would pull this off, that in itself was just an amazing experience to be part of. But there's so many moving parts on this thing, and just from sawn lumber to just everything that had to be a lot of stuff done on site in terms of, like, it looks good on paper, right? But how many projects have we seen where it looks good on paper, but in the real world, it's like, how do we build this? But having their background and understanding of just working with wood as a material was really pretty cool. And I think that ties into just the whole Ark Encounter in terms of how Noah and his family and others would have done the first original Ark. But it was really cool to have that part of the process as well.
I was thoroughly impressed with their craftsmanship. I mean, like we were saying, the columns for it are a full tree, and so obviously there's some imperfections there, right? It's not a perfect circle. There's, you know, some kind of different curvature around that tree. But on the inside of the Ark, there's wood skin that's used there, you know, some wood planking. Well, the cuts were so tight up against that finish, you couldn't stick a fingernail in between those two. I mean, just absolutely amazing craftsmanship.
A couple more questions. The obvious one that you've heard before is, okay, let's imagine a flood is hitting the Midwest next week, and we've heard about it. Is this going to be a safe harbor? Does the boat float, so to speak?
You're asking the number one question that everybody asks all the time is, does
Have you ever gotten that question?
Yeah, does it float? And my response is always, I sure hope not. It's a building that looks like a boat, not a boat that looks like a building. You know, it's not supposed to move at all. So no, it won't float.
That's it for this episode. We thank you so much. We welcome questions about the Ark project itself. We'd love to hear ideas about other episodes. We've got the idea bank full of some other serious stuff, some quirky stuff. So we hope you stay with us, and we look forward to talking next time. Ish.
Ish.
Thumbs up. Ish. Oh.